How's it going, everyone? Hope everyone's doing well. I'm not sure if anyone's here yet. Well, Roberto, my biggest fan. Hey, Yusuf. Just gonna wait for hopefully a few more people. Hey, Maida. And then we'll get started. My plan was to edit a photo from a few years ago to start out, or just work on that one. But I think we're going to start out with a photo that I took actually this morning, and see if it shouldn't be too long though. Should be a pretty easy photo to edit, and then we'll go to the one from Norway. So if everyone's doing well, I'm just going to give it probably another minute, and then we'll get started. Hey, Tom. How's everyone doing today? I will keep it. Do you mean will I post this stream? Yeah, usually I put these on the channel permanently. So if you have to leave or whatever, feel free. Hey, Justin. Coming back to New York in a week. That's awesome. Hey, Jim. Hope everyone's doing well. We're going to start soon. Just letting people get in really quick. I've had an interesting day, so. Your name, Tom, your name reminds me of the, you probably don't know who he is, but there's this guy that plays this game called 𝐒𝐤𝐤𝐢𝐚𝐥𝐬, and his name is Tom Davies, I think. And I believe he's from the UK. Welcome, Ralph. Darko, I do have Instagram. It's on the, should be on the screen. Yeah, Jim, I think I'm going to make I'm gonna make it regular. Every Wednesday at 5 p.m. Eastern will be the standard, but then I'll probably do more than that, but that'll be the one that I stick to every week unless something happens. Welcome, Billin. Yeah, GeoWizard is his name. Yeah, it's fun to watch. It's really interesting. I'm so jealous because it's kind of one of those things where I'm like, man, this guy can play 𝐒𝐤𝐤𝐢𝐚𝐥𝐬, record himself, and then get like 500,000 views on each video. And I'm just like, man, if I could just sit there and play. I mean, he's really good at it, so don't get me wrong. But in a world where, you know, if you told me 4 years ago, if I just started streaming 𝐒𝐤𝐤𝐢𝐚𝐥𝐬 that videos or whatever, that could be where I am now is pretty impressive. It's crazy. All right, let's get started. I'm going to switch screens. This is going to be the photo. Well, this might be the photo we edit. There's a few selections. So a little story behind this is, hey, well, I'll just call you Mazda. How's it going? It's going all right. Had an interesting morning. So I filmed an episode last night and this morning. And yesterday the plan was to just kind of scout the area a little bit and come back this morning because it was supposed to be pretty clear. And there was a lot of fresh snow that wasn't going to be melted away. And this hike is not that intense when you read it. It's only 1.5 miles up, which is not a big deal. I mean, typically when I hike with my heaviest pack, I can do about 6 miles total without much issue, depending on the altitude. But this 1.5 miles was 1,400 feet up. So basically, I don't think there's a single stretch of the hike that isn't an incline. And I didn't make it. I didn't. By I didn't make it, I mean I did not get to the destination I was trying to in time for sunrise. And I'll release a video about it, so I'll talk about it in there. But the only photos I took are these quick photos that I just kind of found a vantage point really quick of this cloud inversion. And hopefully one of them turns out enough that it's good enough for the video. But it will definitely be a video lesson in terms of, well, being better. I don't even know if being better prepared is the correct terminology, but just trying to get somewhere and not having enough time, I guess. That's interesting, Roberto. Is it the competition one where you're like, you can move and stuff, and then you have to beat out the other people? Yogo, I used Amazon Cloud Backup for the longest time because you could finagle, basically. I actually wrote an article about this. You could finagle a way to back up your entire photo library for free. Hey, Ryan. But they got rid of that, so I moved to Google, but only because I already pay for G Suite, and there's a trick. Basically, it's kind of a trick, where you pay for a G Suite user, which I think is like I think I pay $12 a month, and that handles all my email and stuff like that using Gmail as my email. And you're limited to 1 terabyte, but they don't actually limit you. So I have like 1.3 terabytes of photo storage on there. And so far it's been good. All of my stuff is backed up to a NAS, and then that NAS uploads all the photos. It's probably something I'll talk about later on. Yeah. Thanks, Colin. Hey, Yor. This is a photo I got that, honestly, I could have gotten something. I could have got stuff so much better. I was basically in this valley, kind of stuck between some trees as the sun came up. And it was my own fault. And I just tried to get out of there as fast as possible to get something. And I have to sneeze. Okay, because I said I had to sneeze, I didn't sneeze. So that's how that works. So I think one of these 3 photos is going to be the one that we edit really quick, and then we'll move on to a more complicated edit. This one I think I already did something to, yeah. So my only problem here is, so these 2 photos were great, but there's this branch right in front of me, and I was really fighting it. And my goal here was I wanted a little bit of breathing room for this tree, and a little bit of breathing room for this tree, for the frame, but then there was this other tree in the way. Now I could Photoshop out this and this pretty easily. This part would be a lot harder. So I'm either going to just use this one and edit it and maybe Photoshop this out, but I just feel like this stuff is too far on the sides, and I really would probably have to crop into something a little bit different. I don't know, maybe something like this. It's not perfect. It's just what I got while I was up there. This is probably one that just is a little bit better. Let's just edit this one really quick. Yeah, I've actually never captured a cloud inversion, mostly because I lived in Florida my whole life. And you need pretty specific conditions. It's definitely something where you have to live in that area, I think, unless you get lucky and you're on a trip and it happens. But it doesn't happen that often here, usually, that from what I can tell. The ones I always see are the ones from San Francisco, though. Those are the tried and true cloud inversion shots. Yeah, I'll definitely do something. I think the whole plan for that video would be a video on managing your data and like my entire process of like, I'm out in the field and this is how I handle my files and then what happens when I bring them back. All right. So I'm going to set this 4x5, but I don't know if I'm going to leave it. Nope, I don't like that. Let's go 2x3. I'll probably set it 4x5 if I post it to Instagram. And I think that looks about even. Also, I'm assuming the audio is fine. I turned it up a little bit because I keep checking the live streams and I can't ever actually hear the audio. I'm just trying to find that right balance. Yeah, organizing in Lightroom. Well, I'm probably not the best judge. I do something weird with my Lightroom where I have a catalog for every year. So I don't have just one giant catalog. And then I also break catalogs down on trips. So if I go on like a trip, like a 5-day or 7-day photography trip, I will have a catalog just for that area. And I have specific reasons that I do that, but I don't necessarily know if they're right or wrong. It's just what I do. Okay, great. Hey, Eric, how's it going? You missed me talking about not making it up this hike this morning, which you probably have been on. But we may have come out with something. I don't know. Sometimes, I don't know. I'm not going to get down on myself. I took a nap earlier. I'm feeling better. Stream is energizing. Yeah, Roberto, you can do all that. I don't do that with my actual, even though this library is small because it's just 2021. I don't know why these two folders are not. I got to figure that out later. A lot of the times, the way I organize my photos, especially in an album, I'll show you in the Norway album. The trail was the first and second Flatiron Trail in Boulder. This was sunrise literally this morning, a few hours ago. Well, more than a few hours, but this morning. Okay, let's focus on this photo. Let's get through one. I'm going to slap Adobe Landscape Profile on there. I don't want it to be oversaturated. And I still want that kind of painterly feel. I'm going to remove the blues down a little bit. And you can tell that the sun had come up at this point and hit these trees because right before it, the sun had not hit the trees yet. And I think generally this just looks way better. You've got all these spots of red. Let's see. I don't know if I'm going to add... Yeah, I guess that looks okay. I want to bring the saturation down a little bit more, though. Then I'm going to bring the whites up, but I don't know if I want to bring the whites up for the whole image. I think I just want to bring the whites up for everything below the horizon line. Just because I don't want that to get too bright. That's too much. Probably right there. My only concern, I'm not in love with this photo, but like I said, I got what I got. This is for the video, so hey, Dem. We'll put some flying stuff in there, Photoshop it in. I don't know why, but the horizon just still looks crooked for just a little bit. I don't think it is, though. Not in love with the bottom part of the image, but I do know that if I bring these shadows up, there's definitely lots of detail there, and you can see all the snow. Actually, I wonder if this will work. Hold on. Let's see if I can get the video up from today. Let's see. Hopefully it doesn't. Let's mute the audio. And make this the right size. I'm not sure if this is going to play correctly over stream, but I guess we'll try it. This was the same clip. Obviously the horizon line is messed up. But you can see this tree over here was in the way, and then there was another tree right in the foreground right over here that was in the way. Look at, I mean, you should have seen where I was shooting this photo on. I was on these stairs. It was uneven. I literally thought if I took the wrong step on these icy stairs that I was just going to fall off this cliff thing. And so I was just being super careful. But yeah, that is what it looked like. Yeah, I could use the auto level. So planning ahead, yes and no. Sometimes I plan ahead in the sense of like I have an idea of where I'm going to go to take the shot. But a lot of the times, for local areas, it's okay, it snowed, maybe I'll go somewhere. But if I'm just on a trip somewhere and I don't really have a whole lot of control over the weather, I just kind of do what I can, pretty much. I use a few apps here and there, but I'll be honest and say I'm not like a heavy planner. I will plan out spots, but I won't restrict myself to weather-based stuff, especially if I'm on a trip, because if I'm only there for 5 days, those are the 5 days I have. Okay. I don't think this photo really needs a whole lot. I definitely think that it's a pretty simple photo. Again, I'm not in love with the composition, how these trees are cut off, but it is what it is. Sorry for smacking my tongue there. Like, maybe I could remove this, but I don't think it matters that much. Just the tiniest bit of dehaze. We'll add a little bit of that local contrast to the clouds. Give us a little bit more color there. I still think it looks a little too blue. I'd probably put it more here. Even though it looks super red, it was actually really red. So, hey Gregory. You haven't really missed much. We're just editing our first one. Yeah, if I could have captured just the inversion, I think I would have. But I think the best parts of the inversion are like right here. And the trees are pretty much in that shot. So this is actually focused on the cloud inversion. But I think the lighting here is better. So even if I did crop in and remove the trees as best as I could, I think it'd be cool. I just don't know if I'd be in love with the... Because like I really want this spot. Like this looks okay, but it would definitely be more of an abstract. So I think what I would probably do is edit this one to where I like the colors and everything. And just copy these settings. Let's not copy the crop though. And I'm just copying on a PC by Control-Shift-C. On a Mac, I think it's just Command-C. Same with paste. This looks kind of cool, but I'm not totally in love with it. Mostly because this could have been a lot better if I was just in a better spot without these trees. This does look cool though. I think I'd probably post this as an abstract type of shot. The only problem is I think I focused on the trees for all of these. There's a few that I didn't, but I think on all these ones where the light was hitting the trees, I did. All right. Let's see. Let's finish this one. I'm trying to figure out what else needs to be done. I don't think a whole lot. I think maybe that area down there is still a bit too dark, but I don't know. Maybe the darkness is good with that light on it. I want to be able to see that just that there is snow there, but I don't want to brighten it up so much that that natural contrast of the light hitting the tree is taken away. Because if I brighten it too much and I make it all the same exposure, it just doesn't look very good. So just trying to balance that out would be really good. I think something like that's probably pretty good. I rarely shoot handheld. This was shot handheld because I was in a hurry. And specifically, so let me see if I can get this video up. This was where I was standing. So this is all snow. There's nothing underneath here. It's just, if I put my foot in it, I would fall through. At least fall down. And then here is just like this cliff. So I had my tripod for my video camera set up on a smaller step, and then I was at the top shooting in this direction over on the right, if you can see that. And I just didn't take the time to take out my tripod. I could have, and I probably would have got my ISO down to 100, but for the most part, it was really hard to frame the shot to where these branches in the foreground that you can see in this shot were out of it. while also trying to balance this tree on the right-hand side out of it. And again, if I was just in a better shot, it would be better. Greg, I don't know what you posted, but my auto thing just deletes. It's weird. I don't care about curse words or anything, but I had to turn it on because there was people that were coming in that were, I don't know, going crazy. So, and Greg, you donated yesterday before the stream started, and I appreciate it very much. But just so everyone knows that is watching, if you want to, you can support the stream. There's a link down below, and no pressure. Just thought I would point it out. Yeah, I don't know why the bot is that strict, but I just have it on the default thing, and I haven't played around with it too much. Okay. I think this shot is basically done. I'm going to bring down the clarity a little bit. Again, I'm trying to give this a painterly feel, and I actually think the saturation needs to come down a little bit too. I think it's a bit oversaturated. We can play with this. This is going to add saturation back in, but I don't want it that strong. The light was really strong. That red light was naturally really strong, so I can't push it too far. And I'm just going to balance that out. Add some sharpening. Like I said, this is a pretty simple edit. Don't need a whole lot of sharpening for this image, just because those clouds. Actually, I'm going to bring their sharpening down some. No, I'm not in GME. I'm just joking by what I put on there. It's possible that maybe it's too red, but again, it was that red in person. But maybe I can shift it just a little bit. I mean, I can always edit one of the photos that doesn't have the light highlights on it. But not entirely sure these are better. I like the light on the clouds. Again, not really in love with this photo, but I think that's pretty much it for that. And we're going to move on to the photo that I plan on editing right now. Feel free to comment on what you think of this. And no comment is too harsh because I'm my own worst critic, so. All right, let me get the other catalog up. Like I said, I keep things in different catalogs. So, for example, when I went to Europe, I was there for 7 weeks. This was almost 3 years ago, 2.5 years ago. And what I did was I break my catalogs down into different areas if I'm there for long enough. So this is my catalog for Lofoten in Norway. I was there for a week. And the reason I do that is it just makes it easier for me to control my backups instead of having everything in one giant catalog. Also, back in the day, Lightroom was not as optimized as it is now. And it seemed like as soon as I got over 10,000 pictures in a catalog, it started to slow down. I don't think that's the case anymore, but I just got used to having catalogs for different years. It's not the most optimal way, I highly doubt, and I'm assuming there are better ways to do it. It's just how I've done it for a long time. Yeah, I just wish I was in a different area, and it's my fault that I wasn't. So, it is what it is. Okay. All right, so this is the photo I want to edit. I did an edit a long time ago, so I'm just going to reset it. But this is kind of where we're going to go. Oh, before I get into the edit, Roberto, you asked about organization. So one thing that you can do that's really helpful is collections. So you can just have all your RAWs and however you want to organize them. And then for example, down here, I have collections for different locations. I haven't done this in a while, but I typically do it on a long trip like this where I took, 1,500 different photos. And if I go to a spot twice or 4 times or whatever, they're all in the same area. So like I think, like I went to this spot every morning when the sun came up. So I have it from all different time of day. Some other things that you can do is color coordinate your edits or your pics. You can use stars as well. The color coordination thing helps me know what kind of photo it is. So for example, I label photos in yellow that have yellow light. That's pretty much it. Hey, thanks, Tim. Mazda, I don't know what you just said. I almost caught it before it got deleted. Oh, you removed it. Okay. Yeah, I don't think there's a perfect way to organize your photos. But for my workflow, like, for example, a lot of my photos are on external hard drive. So to give you a really quick rundown of my workflow is if I'm out in the field every day, I would come back, put my photos on my laptop for that trip. And then every night I would back up those photos to an external hard drive. And then at the end of the trip, the photos so that just means that they're on the laptop and they're on the hard drive. And then hopefully I don't have to remove, wipe my memory cards. But if I do, they're at least in two places. And then I use that external hard drive for most of my editing, specifically because a lot of the times I'm editing on this computer that I'm on now, or I'm editing on my laptop if I'm out somewhere. So all of my catalogs are just on an external drive. And pretty much they all live on there in terms of my editing. And then every so often, so once I come back home from that trip, I'll move that entire catalog, entire album, like this Lofoten album, to my network storage. And then what I'll do over time is if I end up adding photos, and usually the only reason I would add a photo is, let's say I take it into Photoshop and make a TIFF or a PSD. That'll create a new file. And then I just make sure that I keep up with backing those up. But that's pretty much my workflow. And like I said, I break my catalogs down by year or trip. So I have a catalog for the whole year, and that'll be things like today, I just went out and shot locally. That'll just be in my 2021 catalog. But if I go on a photography trip, then I'll make a catalog specifically for that trip. Yeah, yeah, Greg, I think that's coming at some point. There's two things. It's hard to organize that kind of video because there's so many steps. I'd probably have to break it down into 2 videos. But the other thing is, like, I know for a fact that some things I'm doing are not the most optimal. They're just the way that I do them because it makes sense for my specific situation, which is if I was only editing on this computer, I wouldn't have all of my photos on an external drive and use that to edit. But that's just how it works for me. This shot is not on a drone. I'm on a bridge. All right. All right. We can get started with the edit. I don't remember what folder it's in. Oh, here's some orcas that were just in the bay that day. Where? I don't remember. See, the problem for this organization is I don't remember where I had that photo. Is it in here? Nope. Okay. And see, this is where disorganization happens. A lot of the times I'll just click on a date, especially since this catalog is so small and I kind of remember what day was which for the light. I'm pretty sure it was this date. Yep. Okay, let's get back to the photo we're going to work on. And let's get started. So the biggest thing is I've done this preliminary edit, which is cool. It's great, but I think this area is still a bit too dark. So what we're going to do is I'm going to basically do I guess you could say an exposure blend, but only with one exposure. Oh, that's interesting, Josh. I don't know why that's the case. Roberto, thank you. Thank you so much. I'm only a little bit away now from 1/3 of a GameStop share. Thank you. It's very much appreciated. Yeah, I use a 𝐒𝐤𝐚𝐥𝐬 for my NAS. It's just the most affordable one out of that, or QNAP. QNAP typically has more resources, but for like photography related stuff, 𝐒𝐤𝐚𝐥𝐬 is perfectly fine. Okay, so before we take this into Photoshop, we are going to do a preliminary edit, and that just means that I'm going to get my colors. Man, check out the difference between Adobe Color and Adobe Landscape for this photo. So one thing I talked about just really quick is that this wasn't always here the last, I think they implemented it 2 years ago. But that Adobe Landscape color profile does a lot of what the blue saturation slider does. So if I pump up the blue saturation slider, you can see that the vibrance in the oranges gets a little stronger. But if I go up here and switch this to landscape, the vibrance in the oranges gets stronger while also bringing up the shadows a little bit. So I've been using this a little bit more than the blue saturation slider, but it really depends on the photo. So do I want profile correction on? Yeah, I think I'm going to turn it on so that if I want to add vignette back in, I can. I'm going to bring my sharpening down. There's not a science behind this. I'm just repeating what a better photographer did in a tutorial I watched years ago before taking it into Photoshop. Don't ask me why I'm doing this. I wish I had an answer. There's people out there that have researched how sharpening works way more than I have, and I just trust them. That's pretty much it. Yeah, I actually don't turn profile correction on quite often for my wide angle lens because I like the natural vignette. That's the best answer I can come up with. In this particular case, I want it so I can add it back in. But sometimes if I'm just doing a quick edit and I like the vignette, I'll just leave it on. Am I using a polarization filter? I use it if I can. I mean, I absolutely will use it if it's a shot that I need it for. Like, for example, these shots, it's funny you ask because I wrote an article about these shots using a polarizer. And these shots I absolutely wanted it on for. But I'll be honest and say I don't remember if I had it on for the shot we're about to work on. Let me go to flagged here, make this a little easier on myself. Thank you, David, and thank you for joining. All right. So we've got our sharpening in place. I think we're looking pretty good for white balance. I don't think we need to shift it very much. Let's see what happens when we put this at 0. No, I think that looks fine. We can always micro adjust it once we get our final image as well. And I don't think there's much more I want to do in terms of what I'm going to do to both photos. Oh, let's create a virtual copy. So now I'm going to have my normal exposure, which is probably this one. And then I'm going to have my brighter exposure. And all I'm going to do is just bring up the exposure a little bit, and then bring up the shadows a little bit. Maybe that's too much. No, that's probably pretty good. I don't really care if I'm peaking on the whites because I'm not going to use this part of the photo anyways. But I will bring the highlights down just ever so slightly so it'll be easier to blend. There we go. So pretty much I'm going to use this photo for the sky and all of these nice colors here. And then I'm going to use this photo for the shadows and kind of the areas that I want to bring the shadows out in. I could probably just keep this in Lightroom and boost the shadows. But I thought it would be more fun and I could get a little bit more precise if we could take it into Photoshop and work on it there. So let's do that. All right, I'm going to open it into Photoshop now. So I'm just right-clicking, going to open as layers. I know you can't see that, but that's all I did. Ihor, I wanted a polarizer on there in the event that I wanted to cut out some of the reflection. So I put it on with the intention of having it basically off as much as possible so that you do get those reflections. but I wanted to be able to turn it on if I wanted to be able to see into the water a little bit. Here, I'll switch back and show you exactly what I mean. Okay. We've got these photos opened up, but I'll go back to that one really quick. So in this particular example, I actually think this is the one I edited. In this particular example, I do have a polarizer on. You can tell that this spot is a little bit darker here and here. But on this particular image, I wanted to cut out the reflection just enough. So over here, it's not cut out at all, but I wanted to just be able to see the rocks. And it just gives you more options when you have it on. Also, it's definitely going to help all of this area in the background that's a little bit hazy, just a tiny bit. That's going to help with that kind of thing. So I'll be honest and say I can't guarantee. No, I know I had a polarizer on for here. I can see it. So that's why I had one on for there, even though I wanted the reflections in the shot. It doesn't have to be 90% or 90%. It doesn't have to be 90 degrees away from the sun. If you're shooting into the sun, you're obviously going to get way less polarization. But a polarizer will work even if you're shooting directly into the sun on things that are reflecting sunlight. So what I mean by that is, if you're shooting directly into the sun, there are things that are going to be like on the bottom parts of the frames or the top parts of the frames that are still reflecting light that you can control just ever so slightly. You're going to have a much larger effect, obviously, when you're shooting away from the sun. But it still does something even if you're shooting towards the sun. Well, thank you for coming, Mazed. Thank you for joining in. I think this is the first time I've seen you in the chat. So thank you. If you guys, let me see here. I wrote an article on this a few years ago, and you guys can go and find it, although all the comparison shots are small for some reason. But the article is here. You can just go on f-stoppers and look for why you absolutely need a circular polarizer. Actually, I think I can just post the link. So if you need to know, wonder if my own bot will remove my link. I hope not. This goes over why a circular polarizer, in my opinion, is really important. So that should help. If you're just joining in, thank you. Of course. For some reason, like I said, the example shots are tiny. So I wonder if I can go in and fix that without getting in trouble. I'll have to look. But the wording there is the most important part. So I think it's absolutely, for landscape photography, the one accessory you need besides a tripod. Absolutely need a circular polarizer. They're not super expensive, and I would recommend the reviews that I did on the magnetic system, which you can watch a video on my channel as well. They make circular polarizers, and I think that magnetic system is pretty cool. But absolutely need a circular polarizer for landscape photography. It does something that nothing else can do, that you can't do in editing, you can't do anywhere else. Okay, so now that we have these two edits together, I'm going to put my dark edit in the front. This is kind of be our base. And again, I'm going to use luminosity masks here. It's more advanced technique. If you don't know about these, that's okay. All that I'm doing is trying to use this little tool up here called TK7. There's multiple add-ons you can get. And I'm just clicking buttons to see what shows me the best white representation. So anything in white is what we'll be editing for the shadows. So I'm looking for a good idea of how to bring these shadows out in the foreground. I think that looks pretty good. I'm going to have to hit this first. And I'm not even going to use my tablet at the moment because I think a lot of this is going to be very general painting rather than very specific. I need to paint with black. Going to reduce my opacity to about 30% so that I can add more in if I want to. I'm actually just going to paint over the whole photo to bring out those shadows. I don't care about the shadows over here because that's just going to create more haze. I really just want the shadows here. So probably going to do it one more time, but maybe a little bit less opacity. And now if I turn that mask on and off, that's what we just did. And because I'm using that luminosity mask, you can tell there's literally nothing changing in all of these bright areas. I'm only affecting the dark areas. And then I'm going to go through, turn off the mask, and I'm going to find a different mask really quick, one that's a little bit more intense. Select that, come back in with the same brush tool and decrease the opacity really tiny and just add a tiny bit more in. And now I'm just creating a little bit better balance between these areas that I want to be able to see, because like I said before, it was a little bit too dark. And then what I think I'm going to do is I'm actually going to paint this roof a little bit brighter. Let me catch up on chat. You can just search TK Action Panel or Tony Kruper. Here, I'll just send you a link. I don't necessarily recommend this one over other ones. 𝐒𝐚𝐥𝐬 is also very good. So if you can find some reviews of a comparison, feel free. So here, I'm getting the link now. This is the original one though. So this guy made the first version. Yeah, Raya Pro and 𝐒𝐚𝐥𝐬 are both very good. Honestly, you can't really go wrong with any of them. Do I calibrate my lenses? Do you mean, do I turn on lens calibration in Lightroom? This selection? Right here? Profile correction? Yeah, Raya Pro is pretty much the same thing. And 𝐒𝐚𝐥𝐬 is, I don't use any of the like super crazy stuff. Although I did use a color mask the other day to try that out, but no, then I don't calibrate my lenses. All right. If you're just joining, thanks for joining. We're just doing a little luminosity masking here. And I think we're getting pretty close to the overall amount of shadows that I want. I do think I'm going to try to remove some of these distracting lines here on the corners. Like this, just super distracting, but that'll be last. I'll do that after I do the blend. Yeah, I know the dock for the, actually I'm filming on an 18-35 Sigma art lens that I know that has basically a firmware updater, but I've never used it. Okay, so we're going to select another mask, and I'm going to gently, probably about 15% opacity, just brush this in. And I'm going to try to make this little section over here brighter than the section over here. We should probably bring up the opacity just a little bit more. So basically I'm just creating a little bit of contrast. Actually, I'm going to use my pen for this because I want pressure sensitivity. So give me a second to plug this in and hope that it's still set up correctly, since the last time I used it was at least a month ago. Or that it's plugged into the back of my computer because I just installed another solid state drive. Okay. Yeah, we're looking good. So I just switched to, if you're new to this kind of thing, I just switched to a Wacom tablet so that I can control basically I can control the opacity with how much pressure I add as I'm painting this. Oh, that's not good. Okay. Need to remap this really quick to just the screen. So let me do that really quick. Sorry for the delay. Of course, it was the last monitor I selected. Okay. Now we should be good. Yeah, much better. All right, so make sure all of this stuff is on correctly. Let's see. Yep. I think we're good. Usually it defaults everything correctly. So now I can increase my opacity quite a bit and use the pressure on the pen to paint in these areas. And basically what I'm doing is I'm applying the most pressure over here and letting the pressure go as I go through and just kind of paint this in. The idea that I have here is I'm basically trying to create a false sense of light right here, just ever so slightly. And that's all I'm doing. This is probably still too strong. I'm going to paint with white to add some darkness back into these areas. Because before, if you notice, the right side of this house all the way to the left side is pretty much the same light value. And I'm just trying to go with the sun here and basically make it look like there's more light right here. So that's all I'm doing. Let me catch up on chat really quick. And again, if you guys are enjoying the stream, you can like it. You can subscribe if you're not subscribed. And I really appreciate all the support. Every Wednesday, I will be doing these at 5 p.m. Eastern, and probably have more streams than that every week. But that's the one I'm going to try to stick to the most. Yeah, Ryan, if I had the expertise, I would do a video comparison. But I'll be completely honest and say I don't use luminosity masks. I use luminosity masks quite often, but I don't use a lot of the other tools in here often enough to really feel like an expert to compare them. I want to sell my 16 to 35 for a 24. Is it the F4 or the F2.8 version, Patrick? Oh, okay. Why do you want a prime? I mean, if you're shooting anything but landscapes, that aperture matters, but personally, I would always want a zoom lens with a higher aperture, because I'm never shooting below a certain F value. Okay. I think this is looking okay. I think it's actually a little bit too bright here. So we need to paint a little bit more in. And if you can hear my dog snoring, sorry. Oh, the music stopped. Let me get that going again. All right, so something else I want to do. Let me get this flow just a little bit better here. That's looking a little bit better. I'm going to take a big brush, and I'm actually just going to re-darken the outsides of this just ever so slightly to kind of add. Basically, I'm trying to mimic the light fall off on these shadows so that the light would be stronger somewhere from here to over here, even though technically that's not natural, because the light right here would be the most blocked, whereas the light down here could be the least blocked. But for just the photo purposes and keeping my viewer's eye right on the direct center of the screen, I'm just gently adding some of that back in. I think that's looking pretty good. And this will actually probably get darkened back up when I add some contrast back into the image. And I might even have to bring the shadows up in Lightroom. But I think overall for blending, this is looking pretty good for what I wanted. So I think that's a good starting point. Should I turn the music off, David? Let's see. Yeah, I'm the opposite, Patrick. I would never shoot with primes, but I also only shoot with 2 lenses, and I need the least amount of lenses possible when I'm hiking and stuff like that. And I'm pretty bare bones, and just the ability to change focal lengths is way more valuable to me than lower apertures. I mean, I'm usually shooting at f8 or f5.6 at the very least, unless for some reason I'm shooting the stars, and then I would probably have just a lens dedicated to just stars. But I only shoot landscapes. I feel like if you're shooting literally anything else like people, weddings, street photography, all that, lower apertures matter. Roberto, I have a Samyang or Rokinon, which is the same brand, 14mm f2.8 for star photography stuff, and it is fantastic for the value. So Have I heard of 𝐒𝐸? I've never heard of that, no. All right. So the next thing I want to do, I don't really think there's much else I really need to blend in this photo. I will say I kind of want to darken these sky spots here, but we can do that with a curves adjustment after I make sure that everything here is what I want it to be. Okay. So I think this blend between the two is pretty good. What I'm going to do is, that's not what I want to do. I'm going to group these two together, and then I'm going to add a new layer. So instead of, sorry, didn't mean to click my tongue again. Instead of, blanking on the name, I'm still tired apparently. Instead of spot healing brush permanently on one of these layers, because they're blended together, I'm just going to make a group and make a new layer, and then spot healing brush by making sure that I have sample all layers selected. And so that means that my spot healing brush will only be on this layer, so it's non-destructive to the layers below it. Yeah, Patrick, if you're not a landscape photographer, it's totally different. But if you are specifically a landscape photographer, my personal opinion is primes are not worth it. I mean, some people are going to disagree, but that's just my personal, what I want when I'm out shooting. But if you shoot anything besides landscapes, I could completely understand why you want primes. Yeah, so Ihor, what I was saying is if I don't shoot enough astro to justify carrying around a heavier, more expensive lens on all of the hiking and stuff that I do. And if I do go shoot astro, I'll use that Samyang 14mm I was just talking about, which is fantastic because it's only like $280. It's got great chroma. What is it called? What is the terminology called for how stars look on a lens? I'm blanking on the name, but it has great chromatic, I don't remember, but it's great value in my opinion. So yeah, I stack as well. I've shot on the my f4 for star stuff as well. I don't usually use any denoising stuff. It's very rare if I'm ever shooting above 100 ISO or 400 ISO. But if you're referring to specifically just astro stuff, then I'm trying to stack the photos or take 10 or 20 photos of, say, the Milky Way and stack them. I honestly haven't done it enough though. I think the only time I've ever stacked the Milky Way was on my trip in October for the fall colors, and before that I wasn't stacking. But from now on I will. I'm just not out shooting astro very often. Oh, welcome, Attila. I think I said that correctly. I don't know if these subscription notifications are accurate, because sometimes they all just come in at once, and then I don't see any other ones. So I'm not sure if they're accurate. Sorry, I'm still trying to catch up with chat. I have the 7200 f2.82 from, I think it's 10 years old at this point. But if I were to rebuy for just landscape photography, I would get the f4. The only reason I have, just because the weight difference is insane, but the only reason I have the f2.8 was when I bought the lens. I was shooting a lot of concert photography and I needed f2.8. I don't think it's chromatic aberration. I think there's a specific term for how the stars look or how a lens handles how stretched the stars are. But I can't remember the name of it. Yeah, Ivan, by using a program to stack all the exposures to remove the noise. All right. Now, let's remove these distracting elements here. Thankfully, this will be really easy for Photoshop. Okay, that looks terrible. Oh, it's because I still have the selection from my masking on. Thankfully, there's so much busy stuff going on here. I'm going to not use the pen anymore. Honestly, I should probably use the pen more often so that I get a little more used to it. But I'm lazy and I just go back to using a mouse because it's what I'm used to using. Okay. And I'm just removing these little bright things in because they're a little distracting. And it's really easy with this tall grass because it's also sporadic that Photoshop's going to do a pretty good job of it without me having to do a whole lot. And you're never really going to notice that that's what I did. We may even crop some of this stuff out, but I like to get a photo pretty close to where I want it, even if I plan on cropping that part out, because I never know when I'm going to crop. Sometimes with the spot healing brush, you kind of have to trial and error it. Let's make sure that looks like there's too much of a line there. Let's fix that. Okay, that looks better. Good enough. Doesn't have to be absolutely perfect for this. Although on YouTube, it's probably it might be hard to tell even what I'm doing. These are all fine. I just think those ones right in the foreground were really distracting. So now I can turn this layer off and on, and you can see we removed these elements in the foreground. And if you're just joining, welcome. You guys can, feel free to chat, ask questions. I'm trying to keep up, but a lot of people are talking and it's hard for me to edit and talk at the same time. Okay. Is it just called 𝐒𝐸𝐚𝐥𝐬? I think that's what it's called, actually. 𝐒𝐸𝐚𝐥𝐬. I don't know. I should just look it up. Never mind. I'm not going to waste my time. I think you guys got it. I'm pretty sure it's 𝐒𝐸𝐚𝐥𝐬. And that describes how a lens handles the stretching out of the stars, especially on the edges of the lens. Yeah, the weight difference on the f4 is a lot. I've almost thought of selling my f2.8 and just buying the f4, but I haven't done it. No, Alex, well, unless you're responding to somebody else, I think you're talking about the stars moving in the sky. I'm talking about in astrophotography specifically, there is something basically that makes it, because stars are supposed to be basically circular, but a lot of lenses will represent them as almost an oval. And you can talk about what lens does a really good job at making sure they're not ovular rather than circular. It's really technical for the most part. Most people, I mean, especially we're all consuming images on things like Instagram, you're never going to be able to tell, but that is something people talk about. Okay, we're taking forever on this edit. It's time to focus up. All right, so since I'm removing distracting elements, I'm just going to go through the image really quick and just quickly remove anything else that looks distracting. I think this little buoy thing doesn't need to be there. Whatever that is doesn't need to be there. I don't mind some natural things, but I'm just going to look around. The bird is fine, obviously. Well, maybe it's not obvious, but I didn't mean to do that. There we go. These technically would be considered distracting, but I actually think because they're grouped up enough, they're not that bad. I think overall we've removed anything that I would consider relevant to remove. I could get super technical and remove some other stuff, but I don't think I'm going to. Okay, so now that I have that, I think what I want to do is I want to darken these. It's so weird because this midnight sun had this crazy color, but it looks like it's midday over here in this part of the sky rather than being darker. And I kind of want to handle that a little bit. So we're just going to add a curves layer, and I'm just going to bring down the exposure overall just to darken that a little bit. I'm going to invert it so that it's not actually turned on. Then all I'm going to do is use a luminosity mask to try and get these little white areas selected correctly. It's going to be 3 or 4. Somewhere in here, I think. That's probably fine. And then I'm just going to, I don't need the brush to be that big. I'm just going to paint in we can probably boost the opacity here pretty heavily since we're using that luminosity mask already. And I'm just going to paint in these little areas that are super bright ever so slightly. I might have to get more specific because I think I'm definitely touching some of the parts of the clouds that are bright. So I probably just want to come in here and just paint these in just a little bit. I don't want to do too much. I don't think it's the worst thing ever if that part's bright, but it almost looks like a clear day up there. It's kind of distracting. So I'm just going through and painting these little areas in with that selection. And you can see the before and after. It's just very subtle. But I think I like what it's doing. And so I might end up bringing the whites back up a little bit, which will brighten these areas naturally. But I wanted it a little bit more balanced so it didn't look so bright. It was almost distracting. Technically, I could also come in here and like copy clouds over and just make sure that the whole thing is covered in clouds, but I don't really want to do that. Did I miss any spots? The spot's still. All right. Hey, Gregory, welcome. Yeah, I know it's late for Europeans. When I did the poll, this was the most popular time, so. Hard brush. Yeah, sometimes I have to use a hard brush, but that giant soft brush is fine when it comes to all of this kind of stuff because it's really easy to just blend in with all the chaos of the grass. I think I like 𝐒𝐤𝐚𝐥𝐬 better. All right, so I think this is looking pretty good. And I think we're almost done in Photoshop. Like I said, I think a lot of this photo is carried out by the naturalness. Like I don't have to do a whole lot. I just wanted to balance out the darker parts. Actually, I think this is pretty close to done in Photoshop. So I'm going to save, and I'll try to answer some questions in the chat, and we'll go on to Lightroom and finish up this edit. So if you guys have any questions right now, feel free. Not that I haven't been trying to follow along before. If you're enjoying the stream, there's a support button down below. No pressure, just helps me out. And it means the world to me just having you guys in the chat, to be honest. So that is the most support that I need. This is a lot of fun, by the way. I having a meh day today, and just being on here and having the chat be this interactive means the world to me. Patrick, that is a very high compliment, and I don't think that I should ever be compared to Bob Ross, because that man is the memes are real. But thank you. I understand what you're trying to say. Thank you so much. Okay. Doesn't seem like anyone has any questions right this second. The Bob Ross of Lightroom. Maybe that should be my title. I'll try to... my hair is kind of curly back here, but I don't think I can grow a fro. All right. Let's see. Back into Lightroom. Oh, I never actually transitioned to full camera. Whoops. Oh well. Thank you everyone for tuning in and watching. All right, so we've got our TIFF file here that we just saved, and definitely think I'm going to add some strong contrast in, and that kind of negates all the work we just did. So let's go medium contrast, and then probably bring up the shadows just a little bit. Just a little bit. Okay. I'm going to bring down the highlights some. Actually, one thing I'm going to do, I think I want to create a pretty big vignette on here, because again, I want my viewer's eye to be here, and this part of the frame up here is definitely brighter than I want it to be. So we're just going to use a radial filter and not invert it. And we're just going to add that vignette back in that I think I liked before. That might be a little too strong. Let's bring this out some. I actually think we're going to crop it a bit. Weirdly enough, I think I want the sun like almost directly in the frame. Not a whole lot going on the right side anyways. And this is definitely an image that has the ability to not have to be like a perfect crop. What I mean by that is like, let's say someone asks me for a desktop background. I can slap 16:9 on here and it works. If I want to print it, I can select 2:3 and still work with it. It's very versatile in that way. There's definitely some photos that force you into a specific crop to make the photo work. And thankfully for this photo, I think it's pretty versatile. I'm just trying to get the sun kind of directly in the frame there. I can still probably cut out some of this right side. Okay, I think that's a pretty good crop. How much do I use? For photos, it's only like 1.2 terabytes. But I'll be completely honest and say up until this, I really don't take that many photos, all things considered, for how long I've been shooting. Definitely taking more photos now since starting YouTube than I probably ever have. Now, if I go on a trip, I take a decent amount, but I don't take that many photos. Like, for example, I was in Lofoten for a week, and I took 1,400 photos. And a lot of the times, like, for example, if I go here, a lot of the times, some of these photos are just multiple exposures. So, like all of these photos down here, I'll open up this gallery view. You can get a better idea. A lot of the times I'm taking photos with multiple exposures, and that's tripling the amount for one photo. So I really don't take that many scenes that often. Like, let's say if I go to a sunrise, I might find my one shot and shoot it, and that's it. It just depends on the trip. So let's go back. You can see all these were multiple exposures. At some point I might want to edit this photo, but I don't know. I think I already flagged which one I wanted to edit. Let's see. I think it's this one. I have multiple exposures of this image and this image. At some point I might want to blend them together, but I just love the clouds in this photo, and that's why we're working on this one today. How do I focus stack? I do it manually. Oh, exposure. Sometimes I use the HDR feature to see if a photo is worth blending it. And then if it is worth it, I will manually blend it. Yeah, use a luminosity mask. Yeah, the tints are cool. It's so funny because these photos were taken at probably like 11 p.m. or midnight because of the midnight sun. The only problem with this photo is these tints are actually out of focus. And I'm pretty sure there was people sleeping in them, and I didn't want to wake anyone up. So I didn't sit here and take a lot of photos of the tents. I didn't want them to come out and be like, what the hell is going on? Sometimes I know what I'm doing. Realistically, for me, it's at the point now where I pick a composition and I pretty much stick with that and then take photos as the light changes and then just pick the best one for the light. Every once in a while, I'll select, and you can see this in my videos, I'll pick a composition and then the light will do something I didn't expect and then I'll move for that. But yeah, really? It's so funny because this little beach thing here is like a pullout, and then behind me from where I took this photo is those tents over here. Or maybe, yeah, I'm pretty sure that was behind me. So I just silently walked past and went to take these photos. Okay, let's finish this photo. I don't think we're far off. I I do think that I want to darken the part of the sky up here more though. Really want to take away the brightness distraction of that top part of the sky and make sure. So this is interesting. I need to balance making sure this cloud doesn't look too dark. So what I think I'm going to do is do one of these, but not too strong. Then I'm just going to duplicate it, reset this one, and luminance mask those bright parts. And I probably could have done this a little bit better in Photoshop before, because I was targeting those specifically. But sometimes once you add contrast in and you try to edit that stuff, you end up seeing things that you didn't expect. Realistically, I'm just trying to get something that doesn't select these clouds that are already pretty gray. That doesn't look good. That doesn't look good either. I need to go back over here. And I'm just going to play around with this really quick to see if I can get those looking correct. So that's looking pretty good, but I think what I'm going to have to do. So this is an interesting trick. I'm going to create a radial filter here. That's basically where the sun is and these brightest parts. I'm going to unselect invert so it's doing everything else in the image, and I'm going to bring up the whites. So what this is going to do is brighten the whole part of the image. But the reason I'm doing this is so that, because if I brought up the whites here, it's going to cause this to clip. And this is already bright enough. So I'm basically just bringing up the whites of the whole photo, but I'm excluding this part right here. I can probably bring this in a little bit. And I'm bringing up the whites to kind of bring some of the brightness of the sky back in, but also this foreground. It's just going to add a little bit more contrast into the image. And I think that's looking pretty good. I think we need to bring the shadows up a little bit more. Again, I want this to look dark because it was, but I also want someone to be able to see what it is. That's probably too much. I think we're pretty close here. Definitely want to do some dehaze because that's going to really punch up those clouds. It's going to really add. It does a really good job on this photo, I think. You have to be pretty careful with this tool, but I think overall it's doing exactly what I want. But now that I've done that, I've got to go back and let me make sure I have the right one selected. I need to make sure that I'm keeping these brightness values here the same. I'm still not liking how bright these little spots are. So I need to work on that again. I'm still selecting too much of the clouds. I might have to go back in Photoshop and darken those spots manually again. Because again, I'm wax on, wax off, if you were, massaging, trying to get the balances correct. Because for example, I'm increasing the whites throughout the whole image, which is obviously brightening these parts, and then I'm trying to decrease it, just these spots, using this graduated filter with a luminance mask. But it's not exactly doing a great job of what I want. It's selecting way too much of the clouds rather than those top spots, which is not what I want at all. Maybe I just need to get really harsh with it, but I think if I get too harsh, it just looks really bad. Yeah, that looks awful. Okay. I think what I'm going to have to do, delete this, and I still have it open, so I'm just going to go back in, and we're just going to darken these spots a little bit more. And that's all I'm going to do. So I'm going to make sure I got nothing selected, create another curves layer. Let me check up on chat here. Yeah, the only problem with the range mask is all of that's blue. Sorry, color range mask. To duplicate, do you mean have two of the same image, Ivan? Thank you for joining, Patrick. Sorry, I just caught up in chat. Thank you for coming and chatting. Hey, welcome, Brad. South. I'm gonna assume South Oz is South Australia. Thank you, Patrick. Yeah, my donation goal was meant to be a joke. So if you guys can't see it, but it just says 1/3 of a GME share. Duplicating the masks. I duplicated the graduated filter. And you can just do that by right-clicking it and duplicating it. So I just duplicated it and then added a mask to another one. That's what I was doing. Alex, if you're not caught up, there's a lot going on with GameStop stock. It's a big, I don't know, news thing, and it was just meant to be a joke. Okay. Let's go back in here. We're going to really, I think what I want to do is just trying to bring, I actually think maybe it's in the midtones there. Okay. Turn both of these off. Find another mask again. That looks pretty good. Turn both of these back on. Oh, I need to invert this before doing that. Make the selection. And okay, that's way too much. Let's see here. Got to be careful because it's still selecting those clouds. And it's going to look really weird if I get too heavy with this. I don't think I need to do a whole lot to this. I'm just trying this out to hopefully just balance out this part a little bit because it's a bit too bright. Although I can definitely tell I'm hitting some of these clouds and I don't want to be. Maybe we need a harsher mask. Let's try that. Just got to be careful because it's gonna make this look weird. I'm gonna have to go back in and paint those clouds out, I think. All right. I guess I should say happy little clouds at this point, right? Okay. Let's go back, select the mask. That will get me those clouds again. Nope. That's fine. And I'm going to paint out these clouds as best I can that I just painted on accident. Because I don't want them to be that dark. A little darkness is fine because there's a lot of contrast in the clouds already. But I'm just trying to balance this out. Okay. All right, that definitely darkens some of the areas where the clouds are, but that's okay. I think that's a little bit better. So I'm going to save, wait for it to save, check chat. If you're just joining in, welcome. Feel free to ask any questions. Well, it would be, I would say it's a meme, but it's pretty much like nationwide news at this point, and I think at that point it's more than a meme. If I wasn't doing step-by-step, this particular edit would probably only take me 30 minutes, not that long. Now, I think the time I probably spend the most on this is that I'm going to edit it, and then I'm going to walk away from it, and then I'm going to come back, and I'm going to try to balance the colors, because once I export this, it's probably going to be too saturated. And I think balancing that is the hardest part. So overall, this particular edit is not a super involved one. I have spent multiple hours editing a photo that needs a lot more though, but I'm not blending multiple exposures here. It was one exposure that I did myself. I'm not focus stacking. or anything like that. So, okay, now that we've done that, let's make sure that our, yep, there we go. Adjustments are back on our edit. And I think that's definitely looking a lot better. I think this is probably too strong. I think this is looking pretty good. I think, again, I think we got those as good as we can. And if we look at our before and after, this is after Photoshop, obviously. I think it's looking pretty good. It's probably a bit too saturated. Let's bring that down by about 10. And I'll probably have to play with this more. We can add some sharpness back to the image since I removed it before we took it into Photoshop. Usually about 70s where I look for, and then I mask out all the stuff that doesn't matter as much. And sharpness is very dependent on what medium you're, Sharpness is very dependent on what medium you're trying to do. So overall, this looks pretty good. Maybe I want a tiny bit of noise reduction on this, just because the sharpness is adding some noise back into those shadows. So I'm just gonna, ever so slightly, it's gonna be hard to see on the stream, but I think this is looking pretty good. I think overall, maybe we can increase the shadows just a little bit more. Wonder if I increase the shadows and then pull down the blacks some, how that'll look. Oh, I don't mind that. Let's make sure we're not clipping on too much. I don't mind if a tiny bit clips. Not a big deal. Huh. Does that look better than this? Yeah, I think overall, let's bring down the shadows just a little. Now, we still ended up bringing up the shadows a ton, even though we combined two exposures. But like I said, that was kind of on purpose. I wanted to brighten up this part and then still have this leeway to bring up the shadows to give us more control. And I'm really just looking at this patch of grass here and the grass that's on the roof. And I think we're pretty much done. Somehow I got this horizon line pretty straight out of camera without needing to do anything. I think that's it for this photo. Let me full screen it. You guys won't be able to see the full detail in full screen because of the way I have the stream set up. But I think overall, everything looks pretty good. Like I said, I think the weak part of the photo are these bright spots. And it's not like an insane composition or anything. I will say it's a little bit outside the box. Having the sun directly in the center of the frame. But I do think there's a cool balance between this house and the mountain here. And I just think it works. For some reason, compositionally, I think it works, even though it doesn't really follow a lot of normal rules. Why did I remove the sharpening before going into Photoshop? That's a great question. I wish I knew the. I wish I could give you a straight answer. A few years ago, I watched a tutorial from Ted Gore, who's a photographer that I admire, and when he takes photos into Photoshop from Lightroom, he decreases the sharpness by about what I did. And I think overall, the idea is that your final picture, the picture that I send back to Lightroom once I'm done, I then get to dictate how much sharpness to add back in after all of my blending and edits, rather than the sharpness already being baked in and making it where I couldn't remove it if I wanted to, or if a spot looked bad. Also, when you're blending multiple exposures together, let's say you're focus stacking or blending 3, 5 images together that are different exposures, having sharpness in each exposure can make it harder to blend them together, just because there's going to be more haloing and stuff like that. And I think the idea is to remove the sharpness, blend them together, and then add it back in to your leisure. So yeah, I think that's the best answer I have, but that is all my guess, because I don't actually know like why he did it or why I've seen other people do it. But if I had to guess, I think that's why. It just gives you, it's kind of like we didn't add contrast or saturation in until after we brought it back. And that's just so that we have more control in the edit once we take it into Photoshop. Exactly. Yeah. So when I take it into Photoshop, if I had this image sharpened already, I wouldn't be able to add much sharpening back in. It would be stuck in the image because it would be quote unquote baked in. Yeah, sharpening is usually the last thing you want to do. So yeah. I may have sounded like I didn't know what I was talking about, but I'm pretty sure my assumption on why it's done is correct. Okay, I think this image looks pretty good. If you guys are in the chat, I would love to know what you think about the edit. If there's, should I crop it differently? Do the clouds look okay? Does it look like it should? Let's see if I can find, here, let's go to the edit that I did just in Lightroom a long time ago. Let me see where that is. And we can compare the two. So this was the edit I did in Lightroom a long time ago. I think this was just a preliminary edit I did on my laptop when I was actually in Norway. And this is the edit we just did. And I think overall, they're very similar. I'm looking at the clouds up here right now as I compare the two. Let's just do it this way. So overall, it's going to be hard to see since they're so small, but I'm looking up here. The darkness up here in our Photoshop edit is a little bit better in my opinion. And we're definitely getting a tiny bit more detail out of here. But maybe I do want this area to be a tiny bit darker. Obviously not this dark, that was the whole point. But I think our colors look a lot more natural. So if you look over here in just the Lightroom edit that I did quickly, I think that the sky over here is a bit too strong, whereas over here I think it looks a little bit better. Maybe it could be darkened up a little bit, the highlights here. So I could probably do that. I do like the contrast here a little bit better. So I think what I'm going to do, and again, I'll probably have to come back to this with fresh eyes. I'm going to just boost it to strong contrast. And I think I'm just going to bring another graduated filter in right here. And just bring down the highlights just ever so slightly again. And maybe this strong contrast is still too much. Let's leave it at medium and then increase the contrast slider. That'll give us a little bit more choice. Now I could technically come in here and just get really precise with the dots here, but this way is a little bit faster. I don't have to fiddle as much. I think something like that looks pretty good. What to do with the negative space? I don't think it's that bad. Again, like I said, this isn't like a perfect composition. There's definitely areas of the photo that aren't necessarily doing anything. However, I do think this space over here is contrasting really well with the bright areas over here. And I think that's why it's important. Yeah, I think the first one was too strong, but I knew that, and that's why I wanted to take it into Photoshop. Yeah, I definitely think the other thing that'll be interesting is these shadows need to be brought up a decent amount for posting online. So they look a little brighter here, but they'll be darker in the actual export. Contrast isn't great. I don't know if you meant isn't or is great. Maybe something like this. I think it's at a point now where I will have to come back and check my eyes on it. So I didn't have another photo planned. And we're reaching about an hour and 30 minutes. So I don't know if I should start working on another photo, answer some questions, but I think this photo is pretty much done where it is. Maybe I crop in a tiny bit more here. Yeah, that looks better. Yeah, some photos are just never finished. All right. Let's see. Let's see if I can find another photo to look at least. I would ask you guys to submit some photos right now, but the entire process of taking people's photos in and then getting them into Lightroom and stuff like that can take a little while, and it would be a lot of dead air for the stream. So don't think I'm going to do that. I do want to edit this photo. Maybe we can start working on this a little bit. I've got multiple exposures. Let's see. Once I reset this, yeah. It's crazy how much light changes. What's funny is I think this was actually probably closer to accurate, but for some reason my camera took a really cool image. And by cool, I mean blue, not cool like, you know, it's awesome. Okay. So with this particular edit, let's see. I don't know if I had multiple exposures. I did not. So we've got this one. My only concern is this line here. I wonder if we can remove that easily enough. So let's fix the color balance. It should definitely be where it was. And normally I don't think I would take this into Photoshop, but I kind of want to try to remove this if I can. So let's do that really quick. Let's see, what does landscape do? Looks pretty good. It's probably too much. That looks okay. Gonna remove the blues back down a little bit, just a tad. There we go. Let's take our sharpening out. 10 or 15 is fine. Want the details up. I think this still needs to be a tiny bit warmer for the look I'm going for. This is a very high key image. It is definitely not what I would normally take. If you're just joining, thank you. Thank you for hanging out. Thank you for chatting, everyone. It's been great so far. Let's see. Roberto, are you still here? Did you go to bed? I didn't see if you went to bed. Sorry if you did. I missed it. Okay. I think this looks pretty good, and I want to take it into Photoshop and try my best to remove this and then bring it back in and do a little touch-up. So just going to take it into Photoshop really quick. Hope everyone's having a good day. Don't know if I'll finish this photo today, but nice to get it started while I've got some people watching. If you have any questions, feel free to ask. There's quite a few people in the chat that are perfectly able to answer, as well as me sometimes, if I know the answer. So, all right, duplicate it, delete this background layer, and we're just going to go in here. Okay, let's see what the healing brush does on its own. Okay, well, that at least looks a lot less intense. So the other problem, obviously, is there's this big glare here. And I don't think... So normally what I would do is I would have taken multiple shots here and put my finger in front of the camera. But it doesn't look like that's what I did. Looks like I just took some shots. Because I don't think I thought the light was that great. And again, all of these are too blue. They should definitely be warmer. Like they should definitely be somewhere up here. And it's entirely possible that maybe like a shot like this works, but there's way more flare here. I'm actually streaming on the camera I take photos with. So it's a 5D Mark IV with a Sigma 18-35, which is the lens that I use to film all my YouTube videos on when I'm sitting in front of a camera, which is filmed on a old C100. Alex, kind of, but not really. So when you go from Lightroom to Photoshop, you're going to convert it into a TIFF, which is also 16-bit. So it should have all of the shadow data and all of the highlight data and all of that stuff perfectly fine. I think the only thing you really lose when you go from one to the other is the ability to color balance the same. So I'll show you what I mean by that in a second when I bring this photo back in. But realistically, the only thing you really lose is the raw ability of white balance. But other than that, most of the data is still there. All of the shadow data, detail, and all that stuff. Okay, so what we just did was this with just one brush. This is definitely way better than it was, but there is obviously a huge glare right here that you can kind of see. And I think just because I'm picking out this photo, I'm just going to have to live with it. What I am going to try to do is we're just going to experiment here and see what happens for content aware that spot. It's probably not going to work. And I think what I'm going to really have to do is come in and just take the reds out of that part of the image if I can. Yeah, I don't think this is going to work. Let's see if we can at least get rid of these little bands here and just have the circle. The problem is this whole part of the image is a little red. And that's okay, because that's kind of what's going on with the image. Like, you can tell there's this bright glare into the photo. I don't mind it so much. But let's see. The best way to tackle this now, I'll be honest and say I'm not an expert at removing these things. Sometimes I just kind of have to play around and see what works best. We can also try lasso tooling it and content aware filling that way. I'm just going to press Shift F5. It's going to bring up this menu. I'm going to fill with content aware. I doubt it's going to work. Okay. Well, that doesn't look terrible. It's a little bit too blurry. I think realistically, I just need to remove the colors though. So what I'm going to do is deselect. Would HSL included color correction? No. It's only the white balance when you go from raw to a TIFF. And that is just because the white balance, I'll be completely honest and say I don't necessarily know how the science works behind it. But when you're shooting a raw image, the white balance is selected based off the data that the raw image has. Whereas when you're correcting the white balance on like a TIFF, a PSD file, or a JPEG, you're just telling it to basically be cooler or warmer. Whereas white balance on a raw file is edited. It's hard to explain, but I'll try to show you when I'm done, and I can show you what I mean. I think, yeah. Anytime. I have a video on white balance. If you care to watch it, it's on my channel. Okay. How do we get rid of this red spot? I'm trying to think of tools. Let's see. We could probably go here. Go to hue and saturation. Try to select this color. And just desaturate that spot some, maybe. Maybe make it a little bit more blue. And I'm not worrying about anything out here. I'm only worrying about that circle. Darken it just a little bit. Don't want to remove too much of the saturation. Just trying to get it so it's not as obvious. I think that looks a little bit better. So then what I'm going to do is I'm just going to layer mask this and paint in the spot that we just created and see how it looks. It could look bad because this entire red section of the image is right here. So what I might need to do is just kind of paint in this. But now it's still pretty obvious that it's there. Huh. That didn't do it either. Okay. Well, back to the drawing board. If you guys have suggestions on what you think is best to try to remove this, I'm going to try one more time content aware and see what we can get with something a bigger selection maybe. Doesn't look terrible, but it's still a bit... Well, you probably would never be able to tell from this far back. But when I'm zoomed in, I can see this line right here. Oh, welcome, Alexander. Thank you for joining. I don't like what that did. Okay, let's try one more time. I don't even necessarily need to remove this completely. I just want it to be a little more subtle. I still don't like the way that looks either. So this is what I can do. I can create a new layer, and then I can content aware on this new layer here, trying to select that. Oh, okay. I'll just do it this way. So I'm going to content aware this layer. And then what I can do is change the opacity to blend somewhere in between the two. So something like this. But I still think it looks really mushy. So I don't think that's working either. I don't think this would be considered chromatic aberration. I think this is just a lens flare. You can't see the line on your screen. Oh, yeah. It's probably difficult to see on YouTube, but where I content aware filled right here, there's an obvious line. Now down here it's not so obvious, but up here it definitely is. And I can see it. I really just want to remove some of the red. And I thought, it's interesting because I thought doing what I did before. The only problem is it's hard to see probably on YouTube, but there's a giant glare right here. Here, let me just lasso it out. There's a giant glare here over the whole part. And then this part is more red. So trying to balance removing this red without touching this red is difficult. Oh, I see. Let's see. Let's try doing this, feathering it by a lot, and then going to here and going back to the hue and saturation, selecting we can go into reds here. Darkening that, making it a little bit greener. And again, I'm trying to just play around with this some. I think that's a really big improvement, what we just did. It's far less distracting. I just hate that I can still see it. Yeah, the problem is selecting by color range and using the adjustment layer is parts of this are red, and it's probably hard to see on YouTube. I think that what I just did works slightly, so we're going to keep working off of that. Let's try to go back to content aware and see if we can just get a better fill, and then maybe I can come in and, like someone just suggested, paint in the areas. It just looks like a blurry mess. I don't understand why it's doing that. It shouldn't look that bad. Yeah, it just looks terrible. Okay. I think for the sake of time, I'm just going to leave it like that. I don't think having lens flare in this particular image is a bad thing, because that's kind of like the look we're going for with this giant glare here, and it's not the worst. And this isn't really like a portfolio image. It's more like a, I don't know, for Instagram. And so I'm not too worried about that. However, for the sake of learning and trying to figure it out, I do want to know how to do it better. That's something I will have to practice or try to. I know a few tools I could do. I just don't know if they're going to work. So I'm just going to save this image really quick. We're going to go back into Lightroom. And Alex, if you're still here, I'll show you the difference of adjusting the white balance on a RAW versus adjusting a white balance on a TIFF and what I'm talking about. Okay. So for example, if I'm on the RAW file, Alex, I hope you're still here. If I'm on the RAW file and I adjust the white balance, I can push this thing all the way to completely blue, and you can see as I'm shifting this around how much the colors change with the RAW version. But if I go to the TIFF and I try to change that, the way that it adjusts color balance is basically just making the entire image warmer or cooler. Whereas here, it changes, it's basically changing the math behind the image. So I can make it look the light almost white here. Whereas if I tried to correct this and make the light look white, like right there, this stuff is going to appear far more blue. And it's hard to explain why the difference is. But on a raw image, just know that the white balance is irrelevant. So a raw image is just ones and zeros, and there is no white balance baked in. You can adjust it to whatever you want. Whereas on a TIFF file or a PSD or a JPEG or whatever, you're limited. Now you could still do a lot with this, but you definitely have less information to work with when it comes to white balance after you've converted. So I hope that answers your question. I'll check it out, Gregory. I definitely will try to figure out how to remove that. Again, I think, let me switch this back to the right color balance. I think the little bit that we did, this is what it was before, and this is what it is now. I think that little bit that we did is probably enough, but for the sake of fighting with it, I want to know. Yeah, I could just crop it out. Although I think I want this rock formation here. So I think if I were to crop, it would probably be something like this. I can probably just go into Lightroom and darken that whole area too if I really wanted to. Okay. So again, this is just a high key image. You can tell most of the stuff here is pretty bright. I want to remove some of that to give a little bit more info back to what's over here. I will say the sky is pretty boring. Dehaze is definitely going to add a lot more color into our light. So I'm going to bring that in a little bit. I'm going to bring the saturation down because I think it's a little bit punched because of all the contrast we're adding in. Do I want to bring up the shadows? Probably a little bit. But I definitely want to bring the highlight areas over here down some. Not liking that. Okay, I think we're going to have to use a radial filter. So I think this little spot right here could be better. Inverted, big feather. Just going to darken that spot up a little bit. Okay, a lot of it. That looks much better. Let's widen that out. Dim was in here earlier, but I definitely think Loch Ness Monster might work for this image. I'm just going to talk for him. Okay. It's crazy what this saturation slider will do. I love how much it brightens up the orange part of the image, but if I do this, I'm definitely going to have to bring the saturation down. Yep. I still like the way that looks though. Looks pretty cool. Just trying to balance out how saturated the image should be. I want you to be able to see these rocks, but I don't necessarily need you to be able to tell what they are. Oh, I do not like clarity there. Something else I'm going to try to do here is just darken the sky without hopefully hurting our glow too much. That's too much. Just add a little bit blue back in. And probably more dehaze, which is crazy. I just want a lot of that contrast between the light and the dark. Let's just add strong contrast. Whew. This is a very saturated image. Okay, what I can do is bring down some of the dehaze there, and I can just put it here instead, so that it's not affecting these rocks out here as much. And you can tell as I'm adding dehaze how much more orange that part is getting as well. So to counteract that, I'm just gonna cool off the color balance just ever so slightly, and then again I'm going to bring the saturation down. Whew, that looks awful. Okay, bring the saturation back down. And bring the dehaze back down here since I added some more in there. I think that's looking pretty good. Not my favorite image from this spot. I definitely have some better ones. Heck, even I think this might be better for like photography for me, just because I can tell what's going on a little bit more. But for like a high key fun image, I think this is kind of cool. So. Hey, thanks, Matt, and thanks for taking the time to comment. I don't comment very often either on stuff, but I've been trying to be a little bit more vocal and supportive recently. So I think this is close to where I would take this image. Maybe continue to add some more contrast in for fun. And that looks pretty close to ready to post to Instagram if I wanted to. Maybe I will at some point. Oh, we got to add some sharpening back in. But I think that's pretty much going to be it for editing. So if you guys have any questions or you're still in the chat, if you have some questions, feel free to ask. Thank you for joining along. I hope you guys enjoyed the stream and the photos that we edited. We got through 2. Well, I guess technically this would be the 3rd one if you wanted to count it. And it's been a lot of fun. Thank you guys for watching and joining in. Like I said, if you have any questions, I'll stick around for a couple minutes, see if anyone wants to talk, ask anything, or just wants to talk about their day. I have not socially interacted with a friend in person in 11 months. I moved to Colorado in January. I had no friends, really. And then in February, the whole pandemic thing hit. And I have not seen anyone I've known besides a few family members in almost a year. So talking and interacting with chat, even if you guys are perfect strangers, is still really enjoyable. Anytime, Mike. And again, if the best way you guys can support me is honestly just watching my content and hitting like. I think that's easily the best way. So thank you, Patty. Yeah, you're right, Jim. I think it's pretty obvious that there's a giant glare in this image. So having something down there that with these little reflections isn't a bad thing. It's kind of like when you watch a film and the camera pans into the sun, you could see the lens reflections. And it's not like they try to remove that. They leave it in on purpose. Thank you, Gregory. Yuri, I have no idea what you mean by that. Anytime, Billin. Thank you for joining. Yeah, Turner. I mean, I have my significant other that I live with, so that is at least something. But yeah, I have not seen any friend that I know in person, and it'll be a year in February. The last trip I went back home to see my friends was February of last year. So. Hey, Slade, thanks for joining in and thanks for letting me know. I'm just going to hang out for a little bit, see if you guys have any more questions. And again, my live streams will, unless something comes up, will always be, I'm going to try to make them Wednesday at 5 p.m. Eastern. But I will also do user submitted live streams. There might be times where I just want to go live because I want to edit a photo and it's not on Wednesday. And I'll try to schedule them at least a day ahead of time so that you'll be able to see. I know this sounds like a big YouTube spiel thing, but if you do hit the notification bell, if you're subscribed to me, I do think it tells you when I go live. I'm usually not in anybody's face about hitting the little notification bell because I don't really do it for most of the people I subscribe to. However, specifically for live streaming, I think it can be important if you want to try to check them out. I also try to post on my Instagram when I'm going live and that type of thing. So if you're not following me on there, you can. It's how do I get this right? It's right there. Thank you, Jim. Yeah, James, I am trying to avoid it no matter what health I'm in. So, and thank you for joining. Do I ever make it to the Smoky Mountains? I have not been since I was a kid. Yeah, even just interacting with chat has been really therapeutic. So it's been a lot of fun. I also don't really have any photography friends. So a lot of the times my editing or my eyes or my ideas or anything like that kind of gets stagnant because I really only have myself to critique. So it's nice to talk to other people that maybe know what I'm talking about and things like that. Thank you, Brad. Mohit, I don't necessarily know if I describe myself as sane anymore, but yeah, probably. Yes, Jim, it is Mountain Time, but I've been putting the time in Eastern because typically people know that one better than Mountain Time. So I just say 5 p.m. Eastern, which is 3 p.m. my time, but I've just been saying either Eastern or GMT. Can I spam? No. No, you cannot spam. Yeah, Mohit, I was just kidding. Hey, thank you. Thank you for joining in. And thank you guys for chatting. Today was definitely the most interactive chat, I think. Just a lot of fun. And hopefully as time goes on, I'll have more and more people in here, which also creates a better community for people asking questions and stuff like that. All right, guys. Well, if you don't have any questions, like I said, I will absolutely be streaming next Wednesday. I might do a viewer submitted stream in between there, and I will post it on Instagram, and I will post it on my YouTube story thing, and show you how to submit photos. I think I'm going to have slightly more criteria this time. So I'll probably limit the amount of photos you can submit, and hopefully people can give me more direction on what they're interested in knowing. So I think that's probably the next stream sometime in between this Wednesday and next Wednesday. So be on the lookout for that. And like I said, yeah, there's multiple ways I'm trying to put my live stuff out there. Instagram on here as well. I think most of you that are have been watching the stream know when it's going live though, so that's good. Yeah, I think that living with other people or collaborating with other people is probably the best way to grow once you feel like you're stuck somewhere. And what I mean by that is, I think when you're just learning photography or you're new or you're just exploring, you can learn a ton on your own. But once you really like nail down what you enjoy and what you're shooting, it can be really hard to continue to grow and learn without surrounding yourself with other people that do it. Yeah, Turner, I did one last week. It's on the channel if you care. But I will be doing a user submitted critique or editing, depending on what someone wants. If they just want to critique, I'll critique. If someone possibly wants me to try to edit a photo, I'll edit it. I think I'll do one between this Wednesday and next Wednesday because so many people have asked again for it, and it seems pretty popular. So See you later, Jim. Thank you for joining again, if you're still here. Yeah, you can, there's quite a few photos on there that I edited or critiqued. And if you want to join in the next one, feel free. I will list what you need to do for it and hopefully schedule it a few days ahead so more people know about it. That gives more people time to submit their stuff. But with that said, I think that's going to be it. Thank you, everyone, for joining in and interacting. It's awesome. This has always been something I thought about doing because it doesn't feel like any other landscape photographer does it. And I think it's really cool. You get to see sometimes when I just don't know what to do to something. But I feel like it makes me a little bit more human and approachable rather than just some person on YouTube that doesn't interact with anybody. So I really enjoy it. If I had my preference, I would stream every day, but it just feels like that would be too much. So thank you guys for joining in, and I will catch you again either next Wednesday or before next Wednesday. So thank you for watching. Have a good day, everyone. I'm going to get some dinner. I'll see you later.